You're listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place.
Hey y'all, Michael here. I wanted to jump in at the start of this episode to say thank you to everybody who turned out for the group reading in Raleigh by the North Carolina chapter of the Horror Writers Association. That was such an amazing time, and it was so great to get to hang out after and chat with y'all. My friends and colleagues from the state chapter of HWA are incredibly talented and so supportive of each other. And getting to share that with Arcane Carolinas folks and getting to share some of the Arcane Carolinas community with them, that was really special. If Arcane Carolinas has taught me anything, it's that finding a community of people who are, into the same stuff I am is so valuable and so important. And it meant a lot to have people be there and come up after and just say y'all heard about it from Arcane Carolinas. And if you attended that event, or if you didn't, but you wished you could have, we're going to be doing more events like that, and we're looking at doing them in other locations and maybe even online. We're still working all that out. But if you weren't able to make it because Raleigh is too far, or it just didn't work out for your schedule or whatever, but you're interested, then keep an ear out, and I'll let y'all know about other readings like that in other places as we get them scheduled. In the meantime, speaking of public events, I'll be at Black Mountain Public Library in Black Mountain, North Carolina, near Asheville on May 8th to talk about a very fun and weird local story from just down the road in Morganton. And I'll be at Carolina Fear Fest in Raleigh, North Carolina over Memorial Day weekend, May 24th to 26th, including at least one panel where I'll be talking about the technology behind Arcane Carolinas. I'll also be at Congregate in Winston-Salem in July, where current plan is to be joined by special guest co-host Tally Johnson. So it's going to be a great time. And Charlie and I will be hosting and recording at the spooky season kickoff at Arcane in Durham, North Carolina on September 26th. I also want to take a second to point out that there is kind of a long bit at the start of this where Charlie and I just went completely off the rails. And normally I would have cut that and stuck it at the end as a stinger. But we had so much fun just getting to hang out and record this. Our schedules have really not meshed lately, just due to work stuff. We both have a lot going on in our day jobs. And we really, really enjoyed getting to just hang out and talk and have fun with each other. And so I left all that in. Sometimes we hear from folks that y'all like the parts where we're just two friends socializing more than anything. And I thought, well, maybe this will be a little something for y'all. When we're recording, I tend to imagine that there is a third person, sort of undefined in who they are. So they're you, whoever you might be, sitting at the table with us. And so I left that in for that open third chair person. But don't worry, we also do dig into a legend and all the history behind it and all that good stuff too. I just wanted to point that out because we really value hearing from folks that you enjoy us just getting to hang out. And so there you go. That's a weird opening. And now I'm going to stop doing weird opening because I've got all the business taken care of and I've said the weird stuff. So thanks for listening and on with the show. We are recording.
All right. Hello and welcome back to Arcane Carolinas. This is the third time we've tried to start this episode today. Will it happen? Who knows? Stay tuned.
I think it's important to note the just today part of that. So yeah, we're having a time.
This is it's pretty typical. I'm your co-host, Charlie Mushaw.
I am your co-host, multi-award-winning novelist and single award-winning podcaster, Michael G. Williams.
Multiple runner-up podcaster. Second place is an award.
Yeah, totally. I bet a silver medal would look pretty good on the wall.
Yeah, totally.
That's all I'm saying.
I mean, we already got a gold. What do you need another one for? I got to catch them all. It's like Pokemon. I need them.
We're going to get that regional EGOT,
the regional. Locally known.
There's a lot worse things to be than locally known, frankly.
I'm fine with it. Anyway, welcome to Arcane Carolinas. This is not a Charlie episode. This is a Michael episode. So I am going to sit back and let him talk.
Okay.
That sounded really, really game show hosty.
Well, if you ever host a game show, you'll know that you've got the voice for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me a game show. Somebody out there, make a game show and let me host it.
I'm trying to, what was the name of the one from the 80s that was the No Whammies show?
Oh, yeah. No whammies, no whammies, no whammies.
Yeah.
Right now, everyone listening is mad at us.
Right. Everybody's just shouted the name of this TV show. But what I want is for us one day to get to do a remake of that. But the whammies, instead of like the little critters that they had, are different cryptids from the Carolinas.
Oh, yeah.
That would be a lot of fun. I'm going to tuck that away as a convention idea.
Yeah, we should. I was about to say, we can do that. We just have to do it at a convention, at a con. Well, there you go. Coming soon at some point, we'll host some sort of cryptidy game show.
Definitely. Speaking of cons, this is an episode that we attempted to record at Retcon.
Ah, yes.
It was going to go in spooky season batch of like live episodes from conventions, and it was a lot of fun. It was not a success as a recording endeavor, but it was a great success as fun to have at a convention.
Because there was an air conditioner that they had wheeled in. I'm not even going to call it an air conditioner. It was really loud, not particularly cold, box shaped. It was like R2D2's bully. Like, I think it's just big and square, ugly and loud.
Retcon was super fun. It always is. We love those people.
Yeah. This is not a reflection on them.
Not a good recording environment, but we still had fun.
Yeah, I did. I hope other people did.
Oh, yeah, totally. I really appreciate Retcon for letting us come back and do fun stuff again.
We'll keep coming if you keep having us.
Yeah, totally. They're great. Good people. Lots of fun. It was really good to get to connect with Susan again and get to say hey to her and her crew. It was just like really wonderful to see people. So I just really enjoyed it. Really, really loved it. Just, definitely perspired during that weekend.
Yeah.
But while we were there, we talked about this, which is a fairly quick legend out of Charlotte, but it's really fascinating to me. And I am so glad that I happened to stumble across this.
And I just thought of something that I cannot wait to comment on, because go ahead.
Okay.
You can cut that. That's terrible radio. That's a useless interruption.
But, keep it in mind. Make a note of it.
Yeah, that's just what toddlers do. I also have something to say.
Oh, I guess I'm a toddler. Then.
No, I am in this case.
Know, but I do the same thing.
And now we will begin. And I'm like, I also want to begin.
It's been a while since we've been in a meeting together. So yeah, I definitely am still the guy who's like, I would like everyone to remember that I have an additional point to make. So yeah.
Behind the scenes, Michael and I used to have to attend many meetings together when we worked together.
Yeah. This is like the most fun on Zoom I'm going to have all week.
Whee!
So this legend, all the same people who were like screaming at their computer or their headphones or whatever about the name of that game show are like, get on to the stupid legend.
This is what happens when we don't get to record for a while.
So, are you aware? I know that you are because you were there at Retcon. And anybody else who was there at Retcon has also heard this. But are you aware, or were you aware before Retcon, that a story has circulated for decades that there is an old motel in the city of Charlotte that is populated entirely by vampires?
I was, because of Reddit.
Really?
Yes. People had talked about it loosely in Reddit, but what they talked about does not align with with what you're about to share, which made it really cool for me. That's why one of the things I'm like really excited about this, still am really excited about it, still fun to talk about, is that the fresh coat of paint that stories occasionally get placed on them had pretty major detail missing from when I heard it.
Okay. There's also yet another topic that I believe Spooky CLT has covered. And so again, I promise I'm not trying to steal from Spooky CLT. It's like, but again, like you pointed out, we're in the same neighborhood. So,
and also if it's Charlotte, they've talked about it.
Yeah, totally. That is like their domain. The legend is that in a seedy neighborhood, supposedly, this is the legend. I'm not actually commenting on anybody's place where they live. The legend is that there is a seedy neighborhood in Charlotte, just outside of what anybody else would call downtown, but they call uptown. And in that neighborhood, there is a very old motel, and that all the cars at that motel are old, like antique cars, and that this has been given over to like long-term residents, and that this motel's residents are never seen during the daytime, but are super active at night, and that all the kids in this neighborhood know that that's because it is populated entirely by vampires. It is a vampire nest.
It's the only logical explanation.
Absolutely, obviously. And thus, they tell each other, stay away from the vampire motel or bad things will happen to you. And that this is a legend that the kids in this neighborhood in Charlotte have told each other for decades. That it has gone on and on and on as something that has been passed down from one kid to the next across countless houses in this neighborhood. And that even parents like to tell this legend, and they'll tell their kids, stay away from the vampire motel where the vampires will get you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go running around in the neighborhood at night. Don't go to strange places. Don't go talk to strangers because it's bad people over there.
Perfectly reasonable explanation. Whatever you got to tell the kids to stay out of the bad spot.
The motel in question was, because it no longer exists, called the Toll House Motel. I found some pictures of it online, and if you looked at it from the street, it just looked like a house that had a couple of detached garages behind it. And this location was at 2116 West Moorhead Street in Charlotte. So for folks who want to look it up on Google Maps and see the street view and stuff like that, that is the address to put in. This is, if you're familiar with Charlotte, like just a few blocks from the 77 to 77 interchange. And if you happen to be familiar with parks and places like that in Charlotte, it's also just a few blocks from the Stewart Creek Greenway, which is basically, if you think of Charlotte, the map of Charlotte as a clock face, then this is at 9 o'clock on that clock, but it's like very close to the center.
So the difference that I had always heard that I read once, I read on the internet, it must be true, was I didn't know that it had been torn down.
Oh.
You just mentioned it was at, that location. What I had read said that it was very ambiguous, right? There is a hotel in downtown Charlotte. It wasn't like there used to be. It was there is.
Okay. The building that was the Toll House Motel was originally just a house. It was a craftsman style house with a brick facade and a big bay window in the front and a front door and a front walk that went to some steps in a little residential neighborhood in Charlotte. And it had a detached garage in the backyard. The home was built in the 1920s. And then in the 1930s, as part of a trend nationwide, as motor travel across greater distances became more common, then that home started taking in overnight guests. And it became what then was what people meant by the word motel. When we picture a motel, we picture like the motel from the TV show Schitt's Creek, or
like the horseshoe. Yeah. Like, semicircle, all the rooms in a row.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like we picture almost like a strip mall with a bunch of hotel rooms with external doors.
Yep.
That was not what motel originally meant. Originally, motel just meant more like an inn on the side of the road. So in the 1930s, this home started taking in traveling guests overnight. Eventually, they were taking in enough guests regularly that they converted the detached garage into 2 bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And then they built a third structure that was the third external room.
Vampire business was booming.
More vampires, more cars, they go hand in hand.
Blah. I give it three. I give these 3 blahs. 3 out of 4 blahs.
Originally, when they said review me on Yelp, they actually meant like a victim is screaming, you know.
Right. I wasn't a very good Yelp. It was we'll have to try harder next time.
And up to the 2000s, the structure basically looked exactly the same, and it was still operating as a place that people stayed. By the 1950s, motor courts, which was the original name for what we think of when we picture something based on the word motel, had started to supplant this sort of roadside inn with something that was like a little more formal, a little nicer of a place to stay, you know, a little more guaranteed to have a consistent experience. And so the Toll House Motel in Charlotte started to lose overnight guest business.
Sure.
Became a place where people could stay for longer periods of time. And it was more short-term housing than anything else.
Almost like a boarding house kind of thing.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it was, you know, kind of reverting to that older business model. But as it converted into a short-term housing endeavor rather than an overnight guest kind of business, then according to legend, according to the stories that are told by the people who grew up in this neighborhood, the motel started to get a bad reputation in the neighborhood.
A house of ill repute?
Possibly. Yeah.
No, I mean that very literally, not in the euphemism kind of way. Like it was literally a house with a bad reputation.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. It was a place with a bad reputation. And so parents started warning their children to stay away from it by like the 60s or 70s.
That's reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want your kids hanging around a motel anyway, even if it is nice.
Right. And according to people who grew up in that neighborhood, it is true that the cars parked there owned by those residents, because eventually it stopped being more of a short-term residence and became more of a long-term temporary housing. You know,
well, I'm here and I can afford the rent, and why leave?
Exactly. Those cars, that part of the legend about the cars being older was true. That mostly these were older cars parked there by people who were living in this place. But the children in the neighborhood started coming up with explanations for why it was bad. Because the parents were not telling them why it was necessarily bad.
Sure.
Why it might be a bad place. Kids started coming up with their own story. And eventually the story that won out was they're all vampires because their cars are older and we never see them do anything during the day. And it's just like totally silent as soon as the sun comes up and until the sun goes down. And then as soon as it's nighttime, the place becomes very active.
I love this. I love so much about this.
I really love this too, because this is a perfect example of one of the purposes of folklore. You know, I just love it. I love the idea of this as a cautionary tale that kids came up with on their own and then started passing down. And then as parents heard this legend, started feeding it themselves. I found a thread on Reddit where people were talking about this legend, and they were kids who'd grown up and they were now adults, but when they were kids, they had grown up in this neighborhood. And one of them, the guy talked about how anytime he and his siblings misbehaved, their father would say, "I'm going to take you to the vampire motel." You know?
Oh, that's great. I'm going to let the vampires eat you.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like so funny to me that the parents in this neighborhood did nothing to contradict this story.
Right.
In that thread, there were just a ton of people, like a really shocking number of people talking about this being a story that they absolutely knew and believed with utter conviction as children. These days, the vampire motel is not there.
You shared a picture at an event, and it was like the most generic looking apartment building.
It's one of those 5-story apartment buildings that you see cropping up in every downtown at the moment. It just looks like that. It's just a big apartment building with a bunch of balconies that are very small. And that's what's there now. But in 2005, 2006, it became apparent that the Toll House Motel was either going to go under and be demolished or be sold or something like that. And an effort started to get it listed on the Registry of National Historic Places. And the argument for that was explicitly that this was an example of a type of business that flourished for a brief period of time in the U.S. and then almost as quickly vanished. And they were saying, like, this is a good example of a particular style of home built in a historic era that served a historic purpose and has been more or less preserved. Whether that preservation was through deferred maintenance or not, I do not know.
As someone who is currently deferring maintenance on one or two projects, I commiserate with that.
Yes, that is like the whole story of my adulthood. So
deferred maintenance, same in my autobiography.
Yes, exactly. My memoir will be titled Deferred Maintenance. Deferred maintenance is what my doctor calls it when I go for a physical. But it's really fascinating to me that as part of that, somebody actually went and photographed the property from a bunch of angles and collected, newspaper clippings of advertisements for the Toll House Motel and descriptions of it and paperwork that was filed with the state when it was established as a business, all kinds of things. There's a ton of historic documentation of this property. And the fact that the legend isn't wrong in terms of how people around it experienced it being in the neighborhood.
It's great.
Yeah. It didn't get recognized, though. And then eventually developers moved in and etc.
I like the idea of maybe it was a vampire motel and it got too hot. Too many people knew they had to move.
I love that. It occurred to me when we were talking about it at RecCon, what if the vampires saw what was happening in like downtowns everywhere? And one of them was like, wait a second, we can get more than like 5 people to live here? and then sort of What We Do in the Shadows style, they just like had this revelation of, oh, we could just like knock this down and build an apartment building. And then we'd have like 500 people. I really love that.
That's great. I will run for HOA president. Wow.
I have a novel about that, actually. One of my novels, A Vampire in Raleigh, is on his HOA's executive board.
Well, there you go.
I also love the story because this is the only way, really, that we have preserved this legend is the only way that we have preserved the character of that neighborhood in specific for a lot of its life. And if you go like drive around in it now, or you go do the like Google Maps version of driving around in it, then you can see how the character of that neighborhood has changed very rapidly in just the last 10 years or so. And this story is the only thing left that preserves it.
And now it's an episode of Arcane Carolinas, preserved in perpetuity.
And now it is. And if you by chance are a tabletop role-playing game nerd like I am, and if you're listening to this episode and you found this engaging, then you're probably familiar with Vampire the Masquerade, the tabletop role-playing game. And so I found it very funny to me that the very last comment in the thread that I read on Reddit about this was someone saying, someone is trying to get us to break the masquerade. No more comments after that. My gamer heart swells with joy at that being the closure of their conversation.
We should share something. Speaking of gaming.
Okay.
You, with a smidge of input, a drop of input from me, have been discussing doing like a little one-pager tabletop RPG that only requires like a single D20 or something, and then trying to run that at a convention next year.
Yeah. I did actually write for a White Wolf role-playing game one time years ago and really enjoyed it and have thought, one-pager RPGs are really interesting as an idea and they're not systematically complex.
Nope.
And so there's no reason why we couldn't come up with one that's really fun and is related to Arcane Carolinas and then go run that at a convention because we're both into tabletop role-playing games.
And I'm saying this in an episode now, a full year before we intend on trying to do it, to hold you to it. So
Okay.
This is me putting it out there. So if anyone is interested in playing that game, and it would be super simple rules, and we would just sit around in a room and roll some dice and have a fun scenario. If that sounds like something you would want to do with us at a convention, please let us know. It's something that we want to do with you.
Yeah. Send us an email, send us a message on Facebook, something like that. Let us know.
Where are you at next, Michael? I mean, I don't know when this is going to run, but like, what's your schedule this summer?
I will be at the Black Mountain Public Library on May 8th. Then I'm also Memorial Day weekend, May 24th through the 26th. I will be at Carolina Fear Fest in Raleigh, North Carolina. And in July, I'll be at Congregate in Winston-Salem. And on Thursday, September 26th, we will be at Arcana in Durham, North Carolina, doing our spooky season kickoff.
Yeah, I am really excited for that. That'll be the third year.
Yeah.
That we've done
third
that.
year. Totally.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great time. Arcana has promised us that they will have more staff on hand. They did not realize how enthusiastic people would be for the show.
So it's going to be a really good time. We're going to keep it very accessible. That'll be the next event that I am at. So I'm really excited to get back to it.
Yeah, totally. And in the meantime, I kind of want to just go drive around in this neighborhood in Charlotte sometime. The next time I'm in Charlotte, I'm definitely going to go drive past this apartment building and point at it and think, there used to be a vampire motel there.
Now it's a vampire condominium.
I think anybody who has to pay rent probably knows that feeling.
Oh, that was good. We should end right there.
Okay. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. For more episodes, behind the scenes information, and links to our social media, check out www.arcanecarolinas.com, where you can also buy the Arcane Carolinas book.
And if you like award-winning horror and science fiction, check out my books at michaelgwilliamsbooks.com or visit my publisher, Falstaff Books, at falstaffbooks.com. And if you have story suggestions, comments, or questions, email us at arcanecarolinas@gmail.com. And thanks for listening. The place that I describe, or the place, blah, 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 blah.